The thin, gray light of dawn did little to pierce the oppressive gloom that had settled over Michael's small home, a gloom far heavier than the peeling paint on the window frames or the worn patches on the linoleum floor. It was the specific, suffocating kind of despair that came with watching the person you loved most in the world fade before your eyes, while the ability to fight for them slipped through your fingers like sand. Sarah, the woman whose laughter used to fill every corner of their lives, was now a fragile silhouette against the pillows, her breath a shallow whisper in the pre-dawn quiet. Cancer. The word itself was a cruel invader, a relentless siege engine laying waste to their carefully constructed world. Michael, a man whose hands were calloused from years of honest labor, now found himself idle, a casualty of company downsizing, his toolbox gathering dust in the shed, a stark metaphor for his current helplessness. Each rejection letter for a new job felt like another stone added to the crushing weight on his chest. Their savings, once a small cushion of security, had evaporated under the relentless heat of medical bills, co-pays, and medications that promised hope at a devastating price. He would often sit at the kitchen table late at night, the unpaid bills spread before him like a battlefield map where he was perpetually losing ground. His daughter, 7-year-old Lily, a bright spark in their encroaching darkness, would sometimes find him there, her small hand patting his arm. "Is Mommy going to be okay, Daddy?" She'd ask, her innocent eyes reflecting his own fear. And he'd force a smile, a hollow reassurance that tasted like ash in his mouth. "She's a fighter, sweetheart. We're all fighting, but the fight needed ammunition, and their arsenal was empty." He'd look out the window at old Betsy, their decade-old sedan, parked faithfully by the curb. The car wasn't just metal and rubber, it was a vessel of memories. It had carried Lily home from the hospital, cocooned in her baby seat. It had ferried them on summer vacations, windows down, singing off-key to the radio. It had been there for first days of school, for grocery runs, for quiet drives when words failed and only the hum of the engine could soothe their worries. Now, it stood as their last significant asset, a silent, loyal friend about to be sacrificed. The thought made his throat constrict. Selling Betsy felt like tearing out a chapter of their family story, a betrayal of those happier times. But Sarah's latest scans had been grim, the doctors proposing a new, aggressive treatment, a beacon of possibility that came with an astronomical price tag. He'd lie awake, Sarah's soft, pained mumbles beside him, and the numbers would chase each other through his exhausted mind. How could he choose between their past and her future? The answer was brutal, unavoidable. His love for Sarah, fierce and unwavering, was a fire that would consume anything to keep her light from extinguishing. The car was just a thing. Sarah was his everything. The decision settled in his heart, cold and heavy, a painful resolve. The morning Michael resolved to sell old Betsy, the air felt particularly sharp, each breath a reminder of the raw ache in his chest. He stood by the window, coffee growing cold in his hand, watching the familiar lines of the car. He remembered the pride he'd felt driving it off the lot, Sarah beside him, her hand resting on his, their future stretching out before them, bright and unmarred. Now, that same hand was frail, threaded with IV lines in his nightmares. He replayed Lily's delighted squeals when he'd let her drive in the driveway, her small hands gripping the wheel, her imagination taking them on grand adventures. How could he explain to her that their adventure mobile had to go? He walked into the bedroom. Sarah was awake, her eyes, though shadowed with pain, held that familiar spark of understanding that had always been their silent language. He didn't need to say the words. She saw it in the slump of his shoulders, the determined set of his jaw. "Betsy?" she whispered, her voice raspy. He nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. "Oh, Michael, are you sure?" He sat on the edge of the bed, taking her hand. It felt so delicate. "It's the only way, love. For the new treatment, it's just a car." But they both knew it was more. It was the repository of their shared laughter, their whispered secrets on late-night drives, the scent of Lily's baby powder lingering faintly in the upholstery. "She's been a good car," Sarah murmured, a wistful smile touching her lips. She took us to the ocean that time Lily saw it for the first time. Remember her face? He did. He remembered every detail. Those memories were now daggers. Later, Lily, ever perceptive, found him polishing Betsy with a fervor that bordered on reverence. "Are we going on a trip, Daddy?" she asked, her eyes bright with anticipation. Michael knelt, his heart clenching. "Not exactly, sweet pea. Daddy has to find a new home for Betsy." Her face fell. "But why? Doesn't she like us anymore?" He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, inhaling the scent of sunshine and innocence. "Oh, she loves us very much, Lilybug. But sometimes we have to make hard choices to help the people we love. This will help Mommy." Understanding flickered in her eyes, a solemnity too profound for her young age. She simply nodded, her lower lip trembling slightly, and hugged him tightly. That afternoon, Michael took the photos, each click of the camera phone an echo of his fracturing resolve. He wrote the description for the online ad, his words stark and utilitarian, betraying none of the emotion churning within. Reliable family sedan, well-maintained. One owner. He hesitated over the price, finally settling on a figure that felt like a punch to the gut. Fair market value, but a pittance compared to what it represented, and a fraction of what they truly needed. Clicking post was an act of surrender, a final, painful letting go. The house felt colder that evening, the silence in the driveway amplifying the emptiness that had already taken root in their lives. The online ad for Old Betsy sat amidst a sea of similar listings, a tiny digital SOS cast into the vast impersonal ocean of the internet. Michael found himself obsessively checking his phone, his stomach churning with a mixture of dread and a desperate, flickering hope. Each notification that wasn't a potential buyer felt like a small defeat. The initial responses were disheartening. Lowball offers that felt like insults, suspected scammers with broken English and elaborate stories, questions about trivial details that missed the aching significance of the sale. He imagined cynical eyes scanning his honest description, oblivious to the story of love and sacrifice condensed into those few lines. Doubt began to creep in. What if no one wanted her? What if he couldn't even make this one desperate gambit work? He pictured Sarah's hopeful, trusting face, and the thought was unbearable. Then, an email appeared, different from the others. The sender's address was simple: J. Harrison. The message itself was concise, almost formal. "Good evening. I am interested in the sedan you have listed. It appears to be what I am looking for. Would it be possible to view it tomorrow afternoon? Please suggest a time and location convenient for you. Regards, J. Harrison." No haggling, no suspicious links, just straightforward interest. A tiny ember of cautious optimism glowed within Michael. He replied quickly, suggesting they meet at a public parking lot near their home. He didn't want a stranger coming to the house, seeing the quiet desperation that clung to its walls. He didn't want Lily to witness the transaction. Mr. Harrison agreed, his reply equally prompt and polite. The name, J. Harrison, conjured an image in Michael's mind. Perhaps a retired gentleman, someone looking for a reliable, no-frills vehicle. He tried not to build his hopes too high, but the thought of the agreed-upon sum, small as it was in the grand scheme of Sarah's medical needs, offered a sliver of relief. A temporary reprieve from the crushing financial anxiety. He spent the morning giving Betsy a final, thorough cleaning, a ritual of farewell. He vacuumed every crevice, polished every surface, his movements tender, almost reverent. It was more than preparing a car for sale. It was an act of paying homage to the years of faithful service, to the memories she held. He found a forgotten crayon under a seat, a faded receipt from a long-ago ice cream shop, small tokens of a life that felt increasingly distant. Each discovery was a fresh pang, a reminder of what was being irrevocably lost. He thought about what he would say, how he would act. He needed to be businesslike, detached. He couldn't let the buyer see the desperation clinging to him like a shroud. This was a transaction, nothing more, but his heart knew otherwise. The appointed time arrived with a leaden sky that mirrored Michael's mood. He drove Old Betsy to the designated parking lot, each mile a countdown to the inevitable separation. He parked under a flickering fluorescent light, the vast emptiness of the lot amplifying his solitude. A few minutes later, a sleek, dark sedan, newer and far more expensive than anything Michael had ever owned, pulled smoothly into the adjacent spot. The driver's door opened, and a man emerged. Mr. Harrison was older than Michael had guessed, perhaps in his late 60s or early 70s, with a shock of silver hair neatly combed back and a face etched with lines that spoke of a life lived, though not necessarily an easy one. He was dressed in a simple but well-cut jacket and trousers, his demeanor quiet, observant. There was an air of understated dignity about him, a certain gravitas that made Michael feel suddenly self-conscious in his worn jeans and faded polo shirt. "Mr. Johnson?" Harrison asked, his voice calm, steady, with a hint of a gravelly timbre. "Michael, please," Michael replied, extending a hand that trembled slightly. "Mr. Harrison, thank you for coming." Harrison's handshake was firm. His eyes, a clear, penetrating blue, seemed to take in everything without lingering. He walked slowly around old Betsy, his gaze methodical. He didn't kick the tires or peer aggressively under the hood as Michael had half expected from other potential buyers. Instead, he ran a hand almost gently over the roofline, paused at a small faded bumper sticker of a smiling sunflower Lily had insisted on years ago. Michael's throat tightened. "She's been a good car," Michael said, his voice huskier than he intended. "Never let us down." Harrison nodded. "They become part of the family, don't they?" His observation was quiet, unexpected, and it disarmed Michael slightly. It wasn't the remark of a typical used car buyer. "They do," Michael agreed, a lump forming in his throat. He felt an irrational urge to explain, to tell this stranger about Sarah, about Lily, about why this sale felt like severing a limb. But he bit back the words, clinging to his resolve to remain stoic. He opened the driver's door, gestured towards the interior. Harrison leaned in, his expression unreadable. He noted the cleanness, the faint, lingering scent of polish, and something indefinably family. After a few more moments of quiet inspection, Harrison straightened up. "She's exactly as you described. I'll take her. Just like that. No haggling, no further questions." Michael felt a peculiar mix of relief and a sharp sudden pang of loss. It was happening. It was real. They handled the paperwork quickly, Michael's hands fumbling slightly with the pen. He counted the cash Harrison handed him, crisp $100 bills. The amount felt substantial in his hand, yet pitifully small against the mountain of debt and future expenses. As he handed over the keys, their fingers brushed. For a fleeting second, Michael met Harrison's gaze, and he thought he saw a flicker of something in those blue eyes. Understanding? Sympathy? Or was it just his own desperation projecting itself? "Take good care of her," Michael managed, the words catching in his throat. Harrison simply nodded. "I will." Then, he was getting into old Betsy, the engine turning over with its familiar, comforting rumble. Michael stood frozen, watching his family car, his repository of memories, pull away, driven by a stranger. He watched until it turned the corner and disappeared, leaving an aching void in the parking lot and a much larger one in his heart. He didn't realize he was crying until a tear splashed onto the bundle of cash still clutched in his hand. The drive home in a borrowed, rattling pickup truck from a sympathetic neighbor felt alien and hollow. The space where old Betsy usually sat by the curb was a gaping wound in the familiar landscape of their street. Michael parked, the engine cutting out with a sputtering cough that seemed to mock the smooth departure of his own beloved vehicle. He walked into the house, the silence pressing in on him. Sarah was propped up in bed, a book lying unread in her lap, her eyes searching his face the moment he entered the room. He didn't need to say anything. The absence of old Betsy's familiar presence in the driveway, the tired lines etched deeper around his eyes, told her everything. "It's done?" she asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. He nodded, sinking onto the edge of the bed, the bundle of cash feeling like a lead weight in his pocket. He pulled it out, laying it gently on the worn quilt beside her. He took her, no trouble, Paid what I asked. Sarah looked at the money, then at him. Her eyes, usually so bright with love, were shadowed with a shared sorrow. Oh, Michael. She reached for his hand, her fingers, though frail, lacing through his with surprising strength. You did what you had to do. They sat in silence for a long moment, the unspoken grief for their old car mingling with the grim reality of their situation. The money, the tangible result of their sacrifice, was both a comfort and a stark reminder of their desperation. It would cover the initial consultation for the new treatment, perhaps the first cycle, but beyond that, the abyss of uncertainty still loomed. Lily came in later, her small face clouded with concern. Is Betsy gone to her new home, Daddy? She asked, her voice small. Michael pulled her onto his lap. Yes, sweetheart, she is. Will her new family give her cuddles? She whispered, her head resting against his chest. I hope so, Lily. Bug, I really hope so. That night, sleep eluded Michael. He lay staring at the ceiling, every creak of the old house amplified in the darkness. The image of old Betsy driving away replayed endlessly in his mind. It wasn't just a car, it was a symbol of their life before the illness, a life of simple joys and unburdened laughter. He felt the phantom weight of Sarah's hand on his as they drove, heard Lily's off-key singing from the back seat. He thought of the quiet pride of ownership, the security of knowing they had reliable transport, a small piece of independence in a world that increasingly felt out of their control. The money from the sale, tucked away in a drawer, felt simultaneously like a victory and a profound defeat. It was a lifeline, yes, but a lifeline purchased at a steep emotional cost. He tossed and turned, wrestling with a sense of loss that went far deeper than the mere absence of a vehicle. He felt as if he'd sold a part of their soul, a tangible piece of their history, for a sum that might only delay the inevitable. The wind howled outside, a mournful sound that seemed to echo the emptiness within him. The longest night stretched on, each tick of the clock a hammer blow against his weary heart. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, the kind of day that mirrored the persistent ache in Michael's soul. He went through the motions of making coffee, his movements listless. Lily was unusually quiet at breakfast, her gaze repeatedly drifting to the window, to the empty space where old Betsy used to be. Michael's heart clenched with a fresh wave of guilt. He was about to try and coax a smile from her when he heard it, the distinct rumble of a tow truck slowly making its way down their street. His blood ran cold. Had something gone wrong with the sale? Was the buyer returning the car, claiming some defect Michael hadn't disclosed? Or worse, had he been scammed, the cash somehow counterfeit, and this was some form of aggressive repossession? Fear, sharp and acidic, clawed at his throat. He rushed to the window, Sarah calling out weakly from the bedroom, "Michael, what is it?" The tow truck, large and imposing, was backing up towards their driveway, and then he saw it. Perched on the flatbed, unmistakable even in the dim light, was old Betsy, his old Betsy. Confusion warred with a rising tide of anxiety. What was happening? The tow truck driver, a burly man in overalls, hopped down and unlatched the car. He skillfully maneuvered Betsy off the flatbed, parking her exactly where she always used to sit. Michael stumbled out onto the porch, his mind reeling. What's going on? He stammered, his voice barely audible above the hiss of the truck's hydraulics. The driver, wiping his hands on a rag, approached him with a neutral expression. "Got a delivery for Michael Johnson," he said, consulting a clipboard. "That you?" Michael nodded dumbly. "This is your car, right? The sedan?" "Yes, but I sold it yesterday." The driver shrugged. "Dunno about that. My instructions were to pick it up from a Mr. Harrison's residence bright and early and deliver it here. He paid for everything up front." He then reached into his cab and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. "He also said to give you this." Said it was important. Michael's hands trembled as he took the envelope. It was heavy, sealed with wax, bearing no return address, only his name neatly printed on the front. His heart hammered against his ribs. He looked from the car, gleaming softly in the rain as if she'd never left, to the mysterious envelope. The tow truck driver, his job done, tipped his cap. "Have a good one," he said, climbing back into his truck. With another rumble, he was gone, leaving Michael standing in the drizzle, a maelstrom of emotions swirling within him. Sarah had made her way to the doorway, leaning heavily against the frame, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and bewilderment. Lily peeked out from behind her, equally stunned. "Daddy, Betsy's back," she whispered, a hopeful tremor in her voice. Michael could only stare at the envelope in his hand, a sense of unreality washing over him. With fumbling fingers, he broke the seal. Inside the envelope, nestled against a crisp, folded letter, was not just cash, but a sheaf of cashier's checks. Michael's eyes scanned the amounts, his breath catching in his throat. 10,000, 20,000, another 10. His mind struggled to process the figures. He unfolded the letter, his gaze falling upon elegant, handwritten script. "Dear Mr. Johnson," it began. "Please forgive the unusual nature of this communication and my decision to return your vehicle. After our meeting yesterday, and observing the quiet dignity with which you parted with something clearly precious to you, I was deeply moved. I have been fortunate in my life, and I believe that fortune is best utilized when it can alleviate the burdens of others, especially those carried with such integrity." Michael's vision blurred. He had to pause, his hand pressed to his chest, as if to still the frantic beating of his heart. Sarah had come closer, her hand gripping his arm, her eyes fixed on the letter. He continued reading aloud, his voice thick with emotion. "I recently lost my own wife to a similar battle, a fight we waged with all the resources imaginable, yet ultimately could not win. Your unspoken pain resonated with a grief I know too well. While money cannot conquer all sorrow, it can provide weapons for the fight, and peace of mind in the struggle. This vehicle holds memories for you, not for me. It belongs with your family." Michael's legs felt weak. He leaned against the porch railing for support. The letter went on to explain that the enclosed sum was $100,000. $100,000. The words seemed to shimmer on the page, unreal, impossible. "Use this for what truly matters, Mr. Johnson," the letter concluded. "Fight for your Sarah. Cherish your Lily. May this gift bring you not just relief, but hope. No thanks are necessary. Simply live well and perhaps, one day, extend a similar kindness if you find yourself in a position to do so. Sincerely, a friend." A friend, not Jay Harrison, the formal buyer, but a friend. Tears streamed down Michael's face, unchecked. They weren't tears of sorrow this time, but of overwhelming, incredulous gratitude. He sank to his knees on the damp porch, the letter and checks clutched in his hand. Sarah knelt beside him, her own tears mingling with his, her arms wrapping around him. "Michael, oh Michael, it's a miracle," she sobbed, her voice choked with emotion. Lily, sensing the monumental shift in the atmosphere, a change from despair to something akin to awe, crept forward and hugged them both, her small arms a comforting presence. The drizzle had stopped, and a watery ray of sunshine broke through the clouds, illuminating the scene. A family huddled together on a worn porch, a beloved old car returned to its rightful place, and an act of unimaginable generosity that had, in an instant, rewritten their future. The weight that had been crushing Michael for months, the suffocating despair, began to lift, replaced by a profound, trembling hope. It wasn't just the money, it was the kindness, the unexpected, breathtaking humanity of a stranger who had seen their pain and chosen to act. The following days were a whirlwind of emotion and activity, a stark contrast to the stagnant despair that had preceded them. The $100,000, securely deposited into their account, felt less like money and more like a tangible manifestation of grace. Michael and Sarah moved as if in a dream, yet with a newfound purpose that had been absent for so long. The first call was to Sarah's oncologist. Michael's voice, usually strained with anxiety when discussing finances, was clear and steady as he confirmed they could proceed with the new, advanced treatment protocol immediately. The relief in the doctor's voice was palpable, mirroring their own. Appointments were scheduled, tests were run, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the path ahead, while still challenging, was illuminated by a powerful beam of hope. Sarah, buoyed by this unexpected reprieve, found a new surge of strength. The crushing weight of being a financial burden, a fear she'd never voiced but Michael knew she carried, had been lifted. Her smiles, though still sometimes tinged with the fatigue of her illness, were more frequent, her eyes brighter. She spoke of the future, of watching Lily grow, of simple pleasures they might once again enjoy, things that had seemed like impossible dreams only days before. He called himself a friend. Sarah would say, her voice soft with wonder as she reread the letter, which they now kept safely tucked away like a sacred text. A complete stranger, Michael. Why would he do something so monumental for us? Michael had no easy answer, only a profound sense of awe. He thought of Mr. Harrison, his quiet demeanor, the fleeting look of understanding he'd glimpsed in his eyes. The man's own loss, his own grief, had not embittered him, but had instead carved pathways for an extraordinary empathy. The desire to thank Mr. Harrison properly burned within Michael. The letter had stated no thanks were necessary, but how could he not express the depth of their gratitude? He searched online for J. Harrison, but the name was common, the search results a confusing jumble. The address from which the tow truck had collected the car was a private, gated estate, not a place one could simply approach. He felt a pang of regret for not getting more information, for not being able to look this benefactor in the eye and convey the immeasurable impact of his gift. The money was more than just a financial solution, it was emotional fuel. It allowed them to breathe, to focus entirely on Sarah's fight without the constant, gnawing anxiety of impending ruin. Even Lily seemed to sense the change. The oppressive cloud that had hung over their home had thinned, allowing shafts of light and laughter to filter through once more. Old Betsy sat proudly in the driveway, no longer a symbol of sacrifice, but a testament to an incredible act of human kindness, a constant reminder that even in the darkest of times, miracles could happen. Sarah began her new treatment regimen with a courage that astounded Michael. The side effects were harsh, some days leaving her utterly depleted, but her spirit, ignited by the astonishing generosity they'd received, remained resolute. She fought not just for herself, but for Michael, for Lily, and in a way, for the anonymous friend who had invested so much hope in her recovery. The sterile corridors of the oncology ward, once filled with a palpable sense of dread for Michael, now felt different. There was still fear, the ever-present shadow of the disease, but it was tempered by a newfound sense of agency, the knowledge that they were giving Sarah the best possible chance. Michael became her unwavering advocate, her caregiver, her rock. He learned the intricate schedules of medications, the subtle signs of her body's responses, his former helplessness replaced by a focused determination. He held her hand through infusions, read to her when she was too tired to focus, and whispered words of love and encouragement when the darkness threatened to creep back in. Inspired by Mr. Harrison's selfless act, a seed of an idea began to take root in Michael's mind. He saw so much need around them in the hospital, families struggling with transport, with childcare, with the overwhelming emotional toll. He couldn't offer vast sums of money, but he had time, he had empathy, and he had old Betsy. He started small, offering rides to other patients for their appointments, sharing a kind word, a listening ear. It wasn't much, but it was something, a way to pay forward the incredible kindness they had received. He found a new sense of purpose in these small acts, a feeling that he was no longer just a recipient of grace, but a conduit for it. One afternoon, while waiting for Sarah, Michael felt an irresistible pull to try and find Mr. Harrison again. He remembered the name of the high-end dealership where Harrison's newer car likely came from. A long shot, but he had to try. He described Mr. Harrison to a polite but guarded sales manager. An older gentleman, silver hair, drives a dark sedan. His name might be James Harrison. He recently purchased a used car from me, and I just wanted to express my sincere gratitude for something. The manager's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Harrison is a very private man," he said, "but he is also one of our most valued clients and a significant philanthropist, though he prefers to remain anonymous. He wouldn't give an address, but he offered to pass on a message if Michael wished to write one." Michael penned a simple, heartfelt note, pouring out his family's profound thanks, explaining how Mr. Harrison's gift had not just provided for treatment, but had restored their faith and given them precious hope. He didn't know if Harrison would ever see it, but the act of writing it felt like a completion of a circle. Weeks later, a small, unmarked envelope arrived. Inside, no letter, just a pressed sunflower, identical to the faded one on old Betsy's bumper. Michael knew. Mr. Harrison had received his message. And perhaps in his own quiet way he was saying, "You're welcome." The months that followed were a testament to resilience, love, and the enduring power of human connection. Sarah's battle was arduous, marked by peaks of hope and valleys of exhaustion, but through it all, the foundation of support Mr. Harrison had laid remained steadfast. The financial security allowed them to access ancillary therapies, nutritional support, and home care that eased her burdens and improved her quality of life immeasurably. Michael continued his quiet acts of service at the hospital, his gentle kindness becoming a familiar comfort to other families navigating similar storms. He never spoke of his own extraordinary windfall, only of the importance of supporting one another. His own unemployment eventually ended, a new job offer coming through unexpectedly, less physically demanding than his old work, but offering stability and a sense of contributing once more. It felt as though the act of giving, however small, had opened new doors for him too. Old Betsy, their faithful sedan, became more than just transportation. She was a symbol. Each time Michael slid behind the wheel, he felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the car itself, but for the incredible circumstances that had returned her to them, laden with so much more than her Kelley Blue Book value. She ferried Sarah to and from treatments, carried Lily to school and playdates, and occasionally took the family on short, restorative drives, creating new memories to layer over the old. There was a quiet understanding that passed between Michael and Sarah whenever they looked at the car, a shared acknowledgement of the unseen thread that had connected them to a stranger's profound generosity. Sarah's prognosis, once grim, began to show marked improvement. The new treatment, aggressive yet targeted, was working. Scans revealed a significant reduction in her tumors. Her doctors spoke with cautious optimism, using words like remission and long-term management. The relief was an ocean, vast and deep, washing over Michael and Sarah, cleansing away months of accumulated fear. They knew the journey wasn't over, that vigilance would be a constant companion, but the immediate threat had receded, replaced by a future they hadn't dared to dream of. Lily, too, blossomed in the changed atmosphere of their home. The fear that had shadowed her young eyes was replaced by a renewed sense of security, her laughter once again echoing freely. One sunny afternoon, as Michael polished old Betsy, a familiar dark sedan pulled up quietly beside their house. Mr. Harrison stepped out, looking much the same, perhaps a little less guarded. He simply smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "I was in the neighborhood," he said, his voice gentle. "I heard good news was traveling." Michael's heart swelled. No formal thanks were needed, just this quiet acknowledgement, this shared moment of joy. They spoke for a while, not of money or illness, but of everyday things, of Lily's school play, of the coming spring. An unspoken bond had formed, a friendship forged in an act of extraordinary compassion. As Mr. Harrison prepared to leave, he paused, his gaze resting on old Betsy. "She looks happy to be home," he said. Michael nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "We all are, Mr. Harrison, more than words can say." The car, once a symbol of their deepest despair and sacrifice, now stood as a beacon of hope, a testament to the fact that kindness, when given freely and unexpectedly, could indeed change everything, weaving an unseen thread of connection that could mend the most broken of hearts and illuminate the darkest of paths.